Hi guys. I firmly believe that everyone has a story and that all of our stories, no matter who we are, our stories are important. And as important as our stories are, they're also shaped by and caught up in bigger stories. Stories of our families, stories of our workplaces, our nations, our political ideologies, a whole bunch of other things that are bigger and that are out there and that shape us. And one thing that I find is that our stories, our bigger stories in particular, need to tell us is who the bad guy is. We kind of need to know who the bad guy is because there's something obviously broken with the world. We need to know whose fault it is that the world is the way that it is. We need to know who to blame. It's a very human thing, trying to find out who to blame. And yes, we live in a world which is broken, and I don't want that, and I'm going to be talking about that in this video, but I don't want it to overshadow the fact that there is great beauty in the world. Yes, there is great beauty in the world. Yes, there is great joy in the world as well. There are so many things in the world that inspire us. And if we are part of the lucky ones, then it's only going to happen every now and then. But only every now and then something will remind us of the brokenness of this world. Something will break into our world, and even amongst the beauty and the joy, there will be sometimes even devastating brokenness will hit us. If we are part of the unlucky ones, then we will see that brokenness all the time. And I think in Australia, we tend to be more along the lucky side of things in terms of that spectrum. But no matter who we are as human beings, if we live in the most livable city in the world, or if we live in conflict zones around the world, we're always still going to see that we live in a broken world. And that's why we have these stories that tell us who the bad guy is, so we can blame someone and try to make sense of the world that we see around us. And the story of God, like all big stories, has an explanation for why we see the brokenness of the world when we turn on the TV. Or it gives us an explanation for why we see the brokenness of the world when we look at ourselves in the mirror. And it all starts at the beginning, and it tells us this big story of God. It starts at the beginning, and it tells us who God is, who we are, and what God's purpose is. And in many ways, that would be a great short story if it just finished there. But for better or for worse, the story of God continues, and we find out who the bad guys are. So I'm going to read to you from Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 to 11, and you can follow along on the screen. Verse 1. Now the serpent was more crafty than all the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say, 'You must not eat from the tree in the garden'?" The woman said to the serpent, "We may eat from the trees in the garden, but God did say, 'You must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden. You must not touch it, or you will die.' 'You will not certainly die,' the serpent said to the woman, 'for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be open and you will be like God, knowing good and evil.' And when the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized that they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together, and they made coverings for themselves. Then the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and they hid from the Lord God among the trees of the garden. But the Lord God called to the man, 'Where are you?' He answered, 'I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid.' And he said to them, 'Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from?'" So this is the passage of the Bible, Genesis chapter 3, verse 1 to 11, that we base the second part of God's story around. Broken. Basically, it tells the story of how everything that was made good is broken. And the main points in this second part of the big story are that humans are the bad guy. Humans, not a group of humans, all humans are the bad guy. That we broke all that God made perfect, and that all needless suffering is ultimately due to humans. So, as the Bible tells the story, humans are the bad guy. Humans betrayed God after he had given us everything. God made everything perfect and created us to be his representatives, where we would partner with him in cultivating the universe. That's the first part of the story. And in that first part of the story, there's a restriction, right? The only restriction put on this perfection that God gave human beings was, let God be God. Let God be the God of our lives. Humans, however, rebelled against God and demanded that they be God. And when we talk about rebelling against God, we're not talking about rebelling against unjust rules or things like that. We're talking about actually we rebelled by rejecting relationship. That's what eating the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil means. It's saying, rather than learning and growing the knowledge of good and evil with God, which is what God's intention was, human beings wanted to take a shortcut so that they could be God themselves. They rejected relationship with God. And there were consequences. There were consequences to us. It's not a small thing to reject a relationship with God, according to the story. There were consequences, and those consequences impact us today. And as the story is told, if our rebellion against God was ultimately breaking relationship with Him, then it makes sense to me that in the story of God, the consequences for that rebellion are the breaking of all relationships. So remember, when God created, He created everything good. He made it all good. We're the ones who broke it. But when we talk about God making creation good, we're talking about the goodness, especially in the 3 dimensions of relationship. Those 3 dimensions of relationship are between us and God, that's one axis or dimension of relationship. Between us and each other, that's another dimension or axis of relationship. And then between us and the rest of the creation, that's the 3rd dimension of relationship. Us and God, us and each other, and us and the rest of the creation. The rest of creation is like the environment, the universe, all that kind of stuff. So God made all those dimensions of relationship perfect. But now, because of human rebellion, rejecting relationship with God, something has broken in all 3 of those relationships, those 3 dimensions. They are no longer perfect. So we read in that story that humans, we hid from God. And we see that even today. Even today, humans, as I see the world, I would say that humans hide from God and blame Him for the evil in the world. So we've broken our relationship between us and God. We hide from God and we blame Him for evil. We've broken our relationship between us and other human beings. We lie and we hurt in relationships. We cheat and exploit in business, in government. We lie and hurt and cheat and exploit each other. And then the 3rd dimension of relationship between us and the rest of creation. Creation was never meant to try to kill us. We were never meant to greedily exploit it. But we see all those things happen today. That relationship between us and the rest of creation, has been broken, corrupted. All that is wrong in the world, according to the biblical story, according to the story of God, all that is wrong in the world has at its very root a relationship that's been broken, a relationship that's been corrupted. We think about the relationship between us and God and how that's been broken, and how in the story that led to fear, that led to shame, that led to anxiety, and ultimately it led from exile from God's presence, which equals death. These states of being, anxiety, fear, shame, death, they weren't a part of the story until humans rejected God. We think about the relationship between us and other human beings. All human conflict, from road rage to domestic violence to wars, all human exploitation, from wage theft to predatory loans to slavery, it's a form of broken human relationships. You think about the biblical story, if we read on further, the first 2 brothers, one brother kills the other. A result. That wasn't part of the story beforehand. That only comes in when humans reject a relationship with God. And even if you think about the relationship between us and the rest of creation, all environmental issues are a result of humans breaking relationship with creation, or that there being some kind of corruption in that relationship. We were made as human beings, as we read in the first part of the story, to cultivate creation, to live in harmony with it. And we've gone from that to exploiting the earth out of short-term gain on one hand, to viruses. Everyone remember COVID-19? Viruses killing us and natural disasters. None of this was meant to happen. Creation wasn't meant to kill us. We weren't meant to exploit creation. We were meant to make it flourish. In fact, as the story is told, we were never meant to eat meat. The first animal death is to provide a covering for the naked human beings after they rejected a relationship with God. So As much as it sucks to live in a broken world, there are also opportunities to partner with God in fixing what's been broken. Because of this story and the way I live my life according to this story, because of this story, I'm growing and I'm wanting more so. I do this, but I'm not perfect in it. I want to get better at it. Because of this story, I listen for people sharing about their own brokenness. Oh, Ken, I'm feeling sick. Oh, Ken, I've got this financial issue. Oh, Ken, my relationship's on the rocks. Or I hear about the brokenness of their situation. Oh, there's people being bullied at my workplace. I don't know what to do. Or there's my neighbours. They're going through a divorce situation at the moment. And so because of God's story, I listen for people sharing about their own brokenness or the broken situations that they are in. And because of this story, I think, how can I make a difference? What can I do in this situation? Maybe I can do something. Maybe it's only a little, but can I do something? Can I give? Can I serve? Can I listen? Can I go? And amidst all these options and more, I'm always asking myself the question, can I pray? So when people say, hey, Ken, I'm feeling sick. Hey, can I pray for you for that? Maybe they're Christian, maybe they're not. I just, hey, can I pray for you? Obviously, can I get you a Panadol or whatever else you need, but can I also pray for you? So I find myself, I pray for people's financial situations. I pray for their relationships. I pray for their healing. I pray for their guidance when they don't know what to do. I pray for their comfort when they've lost a loved one or a relationship's broken up or any of those things. And I believe that this posture is consistent with who God is, and it's consistent with his heart to restore what humans have broken. You know, big stories tell the reason. They point out the reason why the world is the way that it is. And according to God's story, it's because of humans. But God doesn't leave it there. The story continues, and he's looking for opportunities to fix what humans have broken. And my way of participating in this story, I don't just passively observe it, I actively participate in it, is that I listen to people. I spend time with people. I notice people. I look at them. I see them. And as I listen, I ask, maybe I can pray for you. Maybe I can serve you somehow. How can I love you in this situation? Maybe you're going through a situation where you're experiencing brokenness. Maybe I can pray for you too. Please feel free to let me know. But we also have some questions here, and this would be good for us just to discuss in small groups now. This first question is, does this part of the story make sense of something that you felt or experienced in your life? I'm sure you've experienced brokenness some way. Does this part of the story frame the things that we see in the world, the brokenness in the world, in a useful way? So think about that. Second question. If it's true that the root of all brokenness in the world is ultimately relational brokenness, what does this mean for your relationships and your own journey to make the world a better place? Maybe you're a Christian. Maybe you believe this story. Maybe you're not a Christian. Maybe you don't believe this story. Maybe you're not a Christian and you want to believe this story. You just can't bring yourself through it. That's fine as well. But in your own journey to make the world a better place, if it's true that the root of all brokenness in the world is ultimately relational, does that make a difference? And then finally, we've talked about the 3 dimensions of relationships, but there is actually another dimension worth noting, and that is the relationship that we have with ourselves. The 4th dimension, I suppose you could say. How could a broken relationship with ourselves manifest? What does it look like to have brokenness in our own relationship with ourselves? And then how does this story give us hope for a flourishing relationship with ourselves? So maybe that's something for us to think about. And if you have any comments, any questions yourselves, any pushback, or any, like I said before, any prayer requests, then please feel free to let me know. All right, thanks guys.